Welcome to This Is You, the podcast. As our journeys unfold, so do our identities. What makes you, you? This podcast explores how different life experiences, concepts, or themes like friendship, religion, loneliness impact how we see ourselves and the world. Join me on this journey as we talk to new guests and learn about their life experiences, reflect on our own, and see what it means for all of us going forward. Your journey to learn more begins now. Today's conversation is actually part 2 of Diary of Two Middle Children for This Is You, the podcast. So if you haven't heard the first part yet, I suggest you go back and listen to the episode. The first episode can be found on our website, www.thisisyoupodcast.com, and it was released on May 15th. Or you can go to the direct link on the website, which is bit.ly/ep4 part 1. In today's episode, Sania and I pick up where we left off, talking about our focus on certain definitions like being good, respect, and honor within our families, and how we've both felt at times that everyone seemed to know what the definition for these things was, but us. And aren't these definitions really a matter of perspective? So we dig into that a bit. We also talk about perfectionism and the trap that can be, being too sensitive, and how all qualities inherently have good and bad things attached to them. So how do you then look at yourself with self-love and acceptance while still continuing to grow and challenging yourself?
I think you brought up something else that I find really interesting, which is the hyper-focus almost on what does something mean. So if you say respect, or if you say honor, or if you say good, what does that mean? What are the components of this word? Like wanting to know the definition of stuff, you know? And I think some people, when I ask these questions, they just look at me and be like, what do you mean? It's just is this thing. Like, why are you... But for me, I think a part of it is I want to get it right. I really want to understand what is it that you're talking about, A. Mm-hmm. Some of that is if I'm trying to people please and I want to be able to know, am I checking off the boxes?
Yes.
Right? Another aspect is I don't want to fail. So again, the checking off the boxes part. But the other part speaks to something that I think it's sort of been woven through what you've been talking about, which is understanding that people have different experiences and different definitions of things, and wanting to give that due service, to give it the depth that it actually requires, especially with concepts like good or honor or respect. And I recognize that looks different for each person. So when I ask those questions, I want to get a good sense of where do you sit on this particular spectrum versus someone else. And some people understand that, and some people are like, oh my God, Auroosa, can we just have a casual conversation where you don't question all these different words and their definition? I'm not always like that, but definitely.
Hey, I almost like 90% of the time that's me, and that's why there's people running out the door. But
you're gonna find your guy, Sonia, and he's gonna get it and appreciate it like my guy does.
Yeah, let's hope so. Otherwise, I'm stuck with my handful of friends, and we're just gonna sit there and philosophically dissect everything. But, it's funny how you ask those questions and how people just don't have answers, because it's true, there is no answer. But at the same time, it feels like everyone seems to know what the standard is, because it's not just verbally stated to us. It's actually through the actions and behaviors of the people around us that really dictate that. Yeah. So if you're sitting at a dinner party with a bunch of aunties and your cousins or your extended family or whoever, you pick up on those social cues. You're just like, that's considered good, or that's considered respectable and honorable, and that's not considered respectable and honorable. And, this person, people don't seem to engage with them that much. Like, why? And then you start to feel like, oh, that's because they're doing this wrong. But then you also see that the people who are excluding others, they also have something that other people talk badly of in another group. So everyone's just sort of confused in their own sort of way, and everyone has this sort of heightened sense of self. But I don't know, it's just really strange to me, because again, there is no definition, but everyone seems to be sold on this idea that it does exist, that there is that perfection that everyone is convinced of actually exists. No one meets it, and we can all sort of target each other because we don't meet that standard. It's unfortunate and it's really stressful, but it is what it is for most people. But I think that everyone should really just talk about it and take a stand against it, or really just sort of really, if you're in a conversation where people are criticizing certain behaviors or someone's path in life, I think it's important to really just put out there, like live and let live. We say that a lot, we hear it a lot, but unfortunately we don't
let people live and let live.
People live and let live. Oh.
Yeah. Have you ever had the experience where it's like everybody seems to understand the definition but you're just sitting there being like, am I the only person who sees that these things don't make sense, or that like I'm getting conflicting messages? Everybody else seems to be on the same page, but I'm kind of like, these things don't make sense to me because they're contradictory to me.
Yeah, exactly.
And then people being like, oh, you're thinking too much about it. And it's like, am I though? Like, I feel like I'm just thinking, period. But okay, sure.
This is like the bare minimum of thinking every individual should be doing.
Yeah. I think it's because it comes to this questioning sort of nature too, right? You question a lot of things around you. You question why things are the way they are. And some of that relates to fairness as well, like wanting things to be fair or accurate or representative or whatever the case might be. And so I think some of it comes from that piece too. You brought up something earlier. You felt like you had this space to sort of be independent and to find your own identity. And I found for me that I did have space to do that. But what I did to myself was I put myself in that box. I was given space to try things and to experience things in some ways under the constraints of being a brown girl. A brown Muslim girl, Pakistani girl.
Oh, but, so many layers.
Yeah, I know, so many layers. So in some ways, I think I definitely was given this space. But for a long time, I thought I wasn't given that space. And I actually had this pivotal moment. And I don't know if you've had a pivotal moment like this, where I remember like I wanted to do something. And I asked my mom, hey, I want to do this thing. Can I do it? And I was in my 20s. So I wasn't young. But, I asked her permission. And she was like, I'd prefer that you did not do this thing. But if you want to do it, then you make your own decision. So I kid you not, I hung up the phone and was like, I really want to do the thing I want to do, but she's going to be disappointed in me if I don't do what she wants me to do. And I just can't deal with that disappointment. And so I didn't do that thing. And then I'm on the bus on the way home because I didn't go to where I was going to go. And I was just pissed, angry, and upset. And I called my sister and I was like, oh, this happened, blah, blah, blah. And she was like, why didn't you just do it then? Like, if you wanted to, why didn't you just do it? And I was like, I don't want them to be mad at me or be disappointed. And she goes, so what if they are? You hide in the bathroom. And then the next day, they'll be fine. I was like, you're so funny. But
she's nailed it.
Yeah, right? I mean, not that you're hiding because you're going to get beat or something, but like the point she was trying to make was that you have to sort of live your life. And sometimes people might be disappointed, but they'll get over it because they love you regardless. And, my sister is 7 years younger than me, so she's quite wise in her advice here. But that also represents a big difference in our personalities because my sister is very much like, I'm going to be honest with you about what I'm doing, but I also am going to do whatever I want to do. Whereas I was like, oh man, I'm going to try to fit in this very small box. And sometimes I need to go out of the box, so I'm just not going to say anything about those times because I was really scared of like the reaction to not being in the box, And I have an older brother, so I was still the oldest girl in my household. So there's certain expectations that come with that too. So anyway, I get home. I go see my mom and my mom is like, I'm really proud of you that you chose to come home. And I'm like, I'm not. I'm pissed that I came home. And then she's like, then why'd you come home? And I'm like, I'm looking at her and I'm thinking, what do you mean, why did I come home? I came home because you said that you wanted me to come home. And she's like, yeah, but I wanted you to make the decision. I told you it was your own decision. I was feeling proud because I felt like you made a good decision. But if you just did it because, you felt like you had to, then that's not really the point. And then I was like, oh my God, you've just shattered like 20 some years of a social construct I've had in my head because this whole time I have tried to not disappoint you or not disappoint dad or not disappoint the people around me and be a good Muslim brown girl and, all of this stuff, and I actually put myself in a box that I had made. They definitely are some constraints that are not me, that are coming from society and come from my family and, everything else. So it's not all me. But I think in terms of how tightly I held myself to it and wanting to be perfect, I was so afraid to disappoint because I really think what I felt was that they won't love me then.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Like, I don't know if I felt loved to begin with, even though my parents were wonderful and they express it as best they can, I think. But for me, there was this part of me that was like, oh man, if I mess up, will they still love me? Like, do they love me? I don't know. And so it was such a pivotal moment for me because the reaction to that was like having to re-examine so many things about myself and see like what did I actually do to myself and what was maybe imposed on me. I had to look at it really differently.
Yeah, I think that we tend to hold ourselves to a really high standard as well. I think that also comes down to the individual, right? So we have expectations about, the way we want to live our life and the way we want to be perceived, and also we want to perceive ourselves, right? I think in that moment, it might have been more about like, you would feel bad about yourself because you disappointed someone you really cared about.
Yeah.
Right? But at the same time, with that situation, I also think that, society and societal norms and standards do play a part in it because sometimes fears are projected onto children because society just has this expectation, right? And your parents don't want you to deviate from that because at the end of the day, it's like you could be totally fine. They want you to have a good time. They want you to, be happy, but they don't want you to do that at the expense of anyone having the opportunity to say anything.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I think that at that moment you have to really understand like, okay, is this me? And you have to make that distinction between like, is this me as an individual holding myself to a standard that I might not even meet, or is this something that's being projected onto me and stifling me? I think I'm just starting to make that distinction, and I'm starting to also really realize that as an individual I do set these certain expectations for myself. And I become disappointed in myself because of me. And it's not because of anyone else. It's because I think that I'm supposed to be a certain way. Because I tend to compare also, have these expectations that are very unrealistic, provided my age. I tend to compare myself to people who are older than me and in a different phase in their life to the phase that I'm in. And I don't really compare the phases. I don't think that anyone should compare anything at all, but I think that just becomes sort of like a natural way of thinking if you've always sort of tried to create this individuality, or in my experience, that's sort of been the case. I think for me, it's always just been also about, how am I doing? I need some sort of parameters. I need a metric. I need, a frame of reference to compare myself to so that I can actually say that, yeah, Sania, you're doing a good job, or you're not.
Yeah.
So that comes back to the individual.
Hmm.
So yeah, I think that I agree with you. You do sort of tend to see that as you progress in life, and the more you also understand yourself and your own personal tendencies.
Yeah. Well, okay, two things. One is I was very similar to you in the sense that I thought once I reached a certain age, I would hit certain milestones.
Yeah.
Right? So it was kind of comparing with what I thought that age would look like, and it never looked like that. It never did. Now it sort of is starting to look like that a little bit more, but I think my expectations are more realistic now than they were at that time. But I had this thought for a really long time that like I would get to an age where all of a sudden I would know stuff. Like, you become an adult and like all of a sudden you have this knowledge. You're not so confused about everything all the time. And I kept waiting for that to happen and being immensely disappointed when it didn't happen. And then when you become a parent, it's like 1,000 times worse because you're like, I'm a parent. Shouldn't I know what to do? Like, isn't that what being a parent is? I say this a lot to my son now because I don't think that actually helped me at all. Like, what it basically did, this message that like adults know stuff or they know best or like things make sense, it actually did a huge disservice to me. And so what I say to my son, who's, 4.5, almost 5 now, and I've been saying to him a lot is like, nobody knows everything. There's never a point where you know everything. You're always learning. We're always finding out new stuff and we're always changing. So you just have to be open to learning more stuff. It'll never fully make sense ever,
Yes. Oh my.
And so it's funny because one time we were picking him up from school and he's like, Mom, the SKs were lying. He's in JK, but JK SKs combined.
Oh, okay.
And I was like, what do you mean? He's like, they were saying they know everything, but they don't because nobody knows everything. And he's like, and I was telling them. And then a part of me was like, oh no, like, you're gonna be that kid that's like, or like he said the other day, oh, this person said their mom knows everything, but like nobody knows everything. So, and I was like, on one hand, I was so proud that he was like internalizing this message. And on the other hand, I was like, oh no, when he says this to other people, they're going to be like offended or like,
Yeah. That's great though. I'm actually very proud of him.
Yeah. And I told him too, I used a science example. I was saying how like at one point we thought Pluto was a planet, but now we know that it's not a planet. And later on we might find out that something else we believed about the universe or believed about it is not true. Because we're always learning more information, our conclusions change. Mm. And my son is really into science, so it was like a good example to sort of give him. But I guess my point is to say what you were talking about, if you feel like you never measured up to what you thought you would be, or you're comparing yourself to people who are not in the same phase of life and thinking, how come I don't know yet? Or how come I'm not settled or I'm not where I thought I would be? I had the same feeling, and it came from this idea that I'm 21. How come I don't know? How come I'm confused still? I'm not a solid person yet.
It really comes from this place of I need to know the answers before I invest myself on a path. I need to sit there and really think this through. And I need to know why everything is happening. And that also comes from a place of not really being able to deal with uncertainty well. And for me right now, I'm at this point where it's like I feel like my life is still sort of uncertain in a lot of ways. It can change gears and things could look different. Am I prepared for that? Do I know enough? I'm scared of not doing well. Being able to live with that uncertainty and really embrace uncertainty, it's challenging, but it's such a beautiful art to master. And that's definitely something that is on the cards for me right now. Like the uncertainty is beautiful. Own it and live in it and relish in it. And, there is stability too. So the art is also about making decisions when you don't have enough information. And this also applies, in business as well, right? Like when you're making a decision, you don't have everything in front of you laid out, right? That's not the point. It's about, you make the best move given the information you have. Mm-hmm. You don't need to have all the answers. You just need to sort of live through things. And it's so funny because even professionally speaking, so with this new role that I've just entered in for the past few months, it's more about project management. I was so excited to just be a part of it. And I just was like, wow, I landed this awesome role and I want to just do everything great. And I want to just go. My boss is like, you're doing great, but I want you to think 1 to 2 instead of 1 to 10. I'm always sort of like taking leaps and I'm always trying to the next big thing. I think it's great. It's appreciated in a lot of ways, but he's saying just for your own sake, you're doing a lot of work, take in the work that you're doing. And I kid you not, my mantra is like 1 to 2. Every time I'm doing something, I'm saying 1 to 2, 1 to 2, because my brain is always jumping 1 to 10. Yeah. And trying to figure out things and put pieces together and puzzles together. It drives you nuts, but you need to really just, take it slow and take things in. It makes things more meaningful. And you also end up catching a lot of things that you wouldn't have if you were in the frame of mind for 1 to 10. So yeah, 1 to 2 is the practice for now.
It's a good mantra to keep repeating, to keep you grounded in the moment, right? Do you think you're 1 to 10? What do you feel like is the underlying root of that?
It can come back to the middle child thing. So I've been around my sister my entire life. She was really my first best friend, still is. She's 4 years older than me, and we don't realize it. 4 years is a long time.
Yeah.
So it's my sister and also some cousins that are really close to us. They're 4 years older plus, and they were going through certain life changes together. And I just associated by default because I had nowhere else to go. And for some reason, I always feel like, I'm a part of that. I'm older than I actually am.
Yeah.
And I'm supposed to be going through similar things, or I'm not supposed to be super off, because I don't see 4 years as like super long, but it is a long time. And I think it just comes from the fact that, like they feel like they have things together and I don't.
Yeah.
Some of it definitely stems from that.
Mm.
And it's something that I didn't want to admit to myself before, but I am admitting to myself now. So I need to sort of break out of that. And also, I know my potential. I want to create impact. The point of my life is to, leave a dent in this universe in extremely philosophical terms. And I can't wait to just get to that. But, it just doesn't come right away. You can't just get there, overnight. It takes time. You're going to have to get the dirt under your nails, and that's how you progress to it. It has to be a natural progression. Another thing that reinforces 1 to 10 is because I have made leaps 1 to 10. In the past, where it's like, okay, well, I did this and I managed to get there because, I put that energy in and the work in, so I can do it, and I can do it again and again and again. And you can't always. So I don't know. It's a number of things.
I feel like it comes to having balance.
Mm-hmm.
So planning in advance is not a bad thing. It can help you in a lot of ways and has helped you in a lot of ways. And you've been able to foresee certain things that you may not have been able to foresee if you didn't plan ahead.
Mm-hmm.
On the flip side, sometimes what planning ahead does is it doesn't allow you to be in the moment either. Every time you reach a milestone, that milestone just moves. And you never appreciate, like, I reached this milestone. Instead, you're like, but I didn't hit that next milestone. And it's like, what about where you are right now and how important where you are right now is? And so I think it's figuring out what that balance is, and also recognizing the qualities that you have that are innate to you are beautiful things used with balance.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Because I remember people be like, oh, you plan so much, like, or like you're thinking so much about this thing, or you're catastrophizing, or you're so afraid to fail that like you're not taking risks, right?
Yes.
And I'd be like, okay, all those things are true, but sure, but, and I always had to put the but in there, right? I was like, but, a lot of those things serve me really well as well. So
Exactly.
You're making me feel crappy for a quality that I'm sort of proud of. And I recognize that there's some detriments, but I also want to be recognized that there's some good stuff about it. I want it to be fair.
Yeah, it
right?
does serve you. Yeah.
What I've learned for me is just trying to figure out how do you bolster your assets and minimize your weakness, right? So like every quality that you may have is going to help you in some ways and hinder you in other ways. That's anything. And so it's just trying to maximize and minimize where appropriate as much as possible, but then accepting that every quality will come with both things. It's not you having a deficit. You are not the problem. Qualities inherently have good and bad sides to them. That's inherent,
Yeah.
And so I've had to work a lot on accepting that and being okay with that, and then modeling that, trying to model it for my son. And I think the other thing that made this struggle hard for me, and maybe for other people, is like I would think about, how do I feel? And when I was conflicted in my feelings, I found that very frustrating. I hate being happy and sad about something. It's like, am I happy or am I sad? Like, pick an emotion, Auroosa. Like, pick something. And then feeling conflicted and confused, I hate that feeling. Intellectually, I know that you can have opposite feelings and hold them at the same time. There's nothing wrong with that. But that's not what I believed growing up. So it's hard for me to reprogram my brain. What I tell Isa is like, you can be really happy about something and really sad about that same thing. And that's okay. You hold both of them at the same time, right? And like many experiences in life are like that, because maybe you're excited about something, but you're nervous about it too. And that's okay. That's okay. That's just a part of the experience, And so we had actually gone away for a week. So the first time we left my son for like that long, but we went away for a week to the Bahamas, just me and my husband.
Oh, wow.
Okay. Yeah. I was like, we probably will have a second child. And before that, I want a trip with just me and you. And he had, we had dropped my son off for like a weekend or a long weekend or a few days, but this was a longer period of time, right? And he was staying with my in-laws, and he was like so happy. He had like the best time there. And he didn't even ask about us. He was just loving it. And my mother-in-law was like, he had so much fun. He didn't even ask about you guys. But then when I came to pick him up, I asked him, and it was just me and him. We were alone. And I was like, how did you feel? And he was like, I did miss you guys, but I also had a lot of fun. And I was like so proud that he was able to like hold both of them.
Yeah.
But like the missing was there and he accepted that he missed us and that was a part of it. But that didn't detract from all the fun that he had, you know?
Yeah.
Whereas I think little me would have been like, I need to feel sad or I need to feel happy. I cannot feel both of these things.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
I'm confused about how I feel. Whereas you don't have to pick. Our human experience is much broader than that. We don't have to be one emotion or the other. And that's inherent in most experiences. So even though I know that intellectually, I still hate being confused and I still get confused by my own feelings sometimes. And I'm working on trying to accept my feelings and my reactions to things and to be okay with them. That doesn't have to all make sense all the time.
Yes. Perfect. That was, yeah, exactly. Confusion, just, live in it for a second and just experience it.
Yeah.
Because I think there's always something that comes out of it anyways, right? Like even just the fact that you are able to feel that emotion, that conflicting emotion just really makes you feel like, yeah, like, that's part of being alive. That's part of being human and that's part of growth. I remember the times when I felt really confused and conflicted about certain things. So I journal from time to time and I write about things that, really bug me and conflicting feelings. And then it's crazy because 8 months down the line, if you go back and you read your previous journal entries, you're like, wow, I have clarity on that now. So every time I feel conflicted now, I'm like, this is going to make sense to me in a bit. I just need to sort of work through it and continue to be in tune with my emotions and not feel like I can't make a move if I'm confused. Like I can still take action even in the state of confusion. That's something that's very normal and you're not going to mess up and you're not going to fail. And if you do that, that's okay. That's part of the process. I love planners and I've gone through so many in my life.
I know.
I still do, but again, it just came from that place of, always wanting to be in control and always wanting to know that, yeah, like this is how things are going to happen. And then it doesn't happen that way. And now you're spending so much time replanning instead of actually doing. So that's something that I've also learned to sort of reevaluate and take a step back from, right? I don't actually plan as much. I don't mind winging it or just saying that, oh, I don't know, that's on the cards. It may not be, just being open to it because I'm constantly evolving and I'm recognizing that like I don't need to have answers if someone is asking me, like, what are your plans for this or what are your plans for that? I can just say I don't know and that's fine. Where I was like, I always had to have something that I was working towards. I always had to have a detailed plan to explain to someone. And then if that didn't happen, then I would just feel like, crap, that didn't happen. And now I feel like I have to re-explain myself. And I don't know, it's just a lot of added layers of stress. Also with planning, I would add this extra pressure on myself that, no, that's not the right way to do it. That's not the right way to make a list. Yeah. That's not the right way to delegate your resources or allocate them and this and that. Like, you're doing it wrong. But there is no wrong way to do it. It's just whatever, works for you in that moment. Make that list and then refer to it when you need to have it. It can be messy. It can have typos in it. All good. It doesn't need to be on paper. Now I'm actually okay with electronic lists. I know. Great. It was blasphemous for me before, but now I'm fine with that because, it's convenient. So yeah, things are changing. Things are moving in the right direction.
Is there a right direction though? Is there? But yeah. Was there a moment where it shifted for you? Because you talk a lot about how now you're trying to live in the moment more, you're trying to plan less or stay 1 to 2 versus 1 to 10. Was there something that happened that really sticks out in your mind that shifted it for you?
It's always feeling anxiousness, always feeling like you don't have that sense of control that really I didn't want to really deal with anymore. And it was something that I had control over. If I worked at it, I can actually tell myself to, it's okay. I don't need to have that down. I don't need to have all the answers. So I was just kind of in a constant state of anxiousness and it was just spilling over into like different parts of my life. So, even at work, I would just kind of apply those same rules and those same, we don't know enough about this or how are we going to do that. And instead of let me create this document as a starting point, rather than doing that, I would just try to create like the perfect document and just be really afraid of bringing it to the table or showing it to others because I was like, I don't know if it's good enough or wait, let me fix this. And it would just never end. And I was like, oh no, I just need to get this to someone, right? Yeah. So now it's about, hey, this is a starting point. Let's build on this, or let's work on this together and turn this into something that everyone likes, because it's not a personal thing. If you're going to take my idea and tear it apart, it's all in the name of the work. It's not that we're tearing Sania's soul apart, right?
Yeah. I really like what you said about it's the idea, it's not you, and having that separation, because I really struggled with that, and I still struggle with that sometimes. Like, it feels very personal. I'll have to think about this more. I don't know if it's a stretch, but I wonder if that's also coming from not having a real role in my family or trying to figure out my place. And so there's nothing to latch on to for your identity. So it becomes everything that you do becomes a part of your identity. And so if anything sucks ever, then you suck, period. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Whereas maybe if there was something else that I had latched onto that was who I believed myself to be, values or whatever, I'm not sure what, then maybe I wouldn't connect so intimately my sense of identity with the stuff I did or produced, right? And I still struggle with this part a lot, because it's like, what is identity? Because we'll use wording like, that person made a bad choice. Not that they're bad, but they made a bad choice. Son will ask me, how do you know if he's a bad guy or a bad person?
Yeah.
Well, that's hard, right? Because who we are is not fixed. Like, we're changing and growing and adapting and all this stuff, and you can learn from your mistakes. So it's not like just because you made a bad choice that you're doomed forever. You can make a better choice next time. You don't have to harp so much on the mistakes that you make. They're all data points. There's lots of data points. But I think what I struggle with then is saying, then what is a bad person? Like, you know,
what's the line? Where do we draw the line?
I have no idea. I've actually Googled this before.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because at night when I can't sleep, because my baby is kicking around in my tummy. But no, I couldn't sleep even before then. But especially nowadays when I can't sleep. I think about, how do I explain? My son is the same. He thinks about concepts a lot. And so, you know, I'm confronted with a little version of me and being like, I know how hard this is. I want to give you an answer, but I don't know yet. How do you differentiate between good and bad? Even people who you'd be like, okay, in history, like Hitler, terrible, terrible things. He believed he was justified in what he was doing.
Yeah.
So did other people who followed him. He came from a particular premise. I mean, I think most people would condemn that premise, and I condemn that premise 100%. But even then, I have a hard time saying this is an example of a bad person. He did very, very bad things, and he was acting on a really, you know, inaccurate belief, and that's really simplifying for sure. But all it is to say is, because I want an accurate definition, Sania, right? Remember accuracy and fairness and all that stuff, that
precision,
like, precision that rules us. You know, then I really struggle, and he wants precision too. My son, he wants a precise answer.
No ambiguity.
Like, oh my God. And I'm just like, I don't know yet. And I can't find anything on Google. How come no one has asked this question? You know, are we just a sum of our actions? Like, or is it more than that? And so I don't know. And that's something that I struggle with, and I'm still trying to make sense of. And even when you make sense of it, then you have to think of, okay, how do I put this in a 5-year-old's language? Right?
Yeah.
Like, you
no,
know?
That's really, really hard.
So I'm going to actually wrap our conversation up. You know, we've actually talked about a whole variety of different things in this conversation. I think being middle children has played a role in how we perhaps view and experience things. But, you know, I recognize, and I think anybody would agree, is that our identities are very complex. They're made up of lots of different things. And so I think in sharing these ideas and having these conversations, we get a better sense of what are the different things that contribute to who we are. And then sometimes how these things trace back to ideas that we had as children and how they then play out in different ways. So thank you so much for sharing with me and going through this process.
Oh, this was really fun. Thank you so much for having me.
So my question for all of you is, how do we define being good? Are we really the sum of our actions, or do we inherently have goodness in us? And what does that actually look like? Maybe you can be my Google search and help me to figure out how do you distinguish between the two. And I think the other question is, how much of this episode can you relate to? Even if you're not a middle child, do you relate to fears of failure, people-pleasing, perfectionism, being called too sensitive, for example? So tell me about those. And lastly, if you are listening to these episodes and find that they resonate with you, please send me an email or a message or a DM. You can email me at thisisyouPodcast@gmail.com or send me a message on Instagram at thisisyouPodcast or on Facebook. So feel free to connect with me in any way you can. I would really like to hear if this podcast is making a difference for you and how you might relate to some of these concepts. Until next time, take care.